All right, Linda, let's unpack some headlines here. Of course, the war raging on in Gaza, Israel standing at the ready to go in with the tanks and the artillery, and people on the edge of their seats watching visuals like this. Concern for humanity.
And waiting for some support from the allies. The Americans have been fumbling around in the House because they didn't have a speaker for 3 weeks. They couldn't deal with Ukraine or Israel or a gazillion other things. And they finally get somebody, and it turns out that he is somebody who's kind of more MAGA than the last guy. He's an election denier. He's anti-abortion. He's a climate skeptic. Whoa, what fun this is going to be. His name is Mike Johnson from Louisiana.
Architect of the Stop the Steal campaign. I can't believe that man is the Speaker of the House. I want to talk it through. We want to talk it through with our go-to when it comes to all things U.S. politics. We take you to Washington, D.C., and our Washington correspondent, regular here on the program, Reggie Cecchini. Reggie, it's just such a fast and furious news cycle. We were going to talk about the search for a speaker, and yet here we are, a unanimous decision in the House.
Well, sure, a unanimous decision in the House after 4 attempts to try and find a speaker. And you're right, with Mike Johnson, a representative from Louisiana, now being thrust into the highest position in the House, so high that he is now second in line to the presidency after the vice president. The question is, who is Mike Johnson, and how did this person who only got into federal politics the year that Donald Trump was elected in 2016 make his way to the top? Well, the reality here is Mike Johnson is not quite a firebrand Republican, but he is so far right and tilts so far to the right that he gets the support from the furthest right in the conference, and it is that furthest right in the conference that ultimately has so much power.
But what happened to all those moderate Republicans who were saying no to Jim Jordan, but this guy's okay? He seems worse almost.
It's a really good question, and a lot of the moderates simply aren't answering. They're saying that Jim Jordan may have been too firebrand. He may have been a little too aggressive. There were outside campaigns that were allegedly underway to try and bully some lawmakers into voting for Jim Jordan. And then it's interesting because some of those same moderates were then going to stand behind Tom Emmer, who was a much more moderate conservative, but his chances were nuked by Donald Trump, who still controls so much of this party. Ultimately, unanimously standing behind a man, like you mentioned, is an election denier, is a climate change denier, is incredibly anti-LGBTQ. And there is a real reality here that we are going to now see some of the most conservative legislation brought forward in the United States, which is going to fly in the face of anything that both Democrats and the democratically held Senate and the democratically held White House are going to be trying to push themselves.
Yeah, they're going to have to take care of that business. So let's talk about the funding, much needed funding bills for both what's happening in the Middle East, Israel's want to eliminate Hamas and fight back and defend themselves, as well as what's happening in Ukraine. I mean, there's a lot of money on the table that has not moved because of this stalemate in finding this new speaker. Is it moving now?
It's not moving yet, and it may not move for a while. Look, $100 billion announced by the President of the United States is a lot of money, especially when you're asking that from taxpayers who are dealing with, personal crises of their own linked to the domestic economy. But at the end of the day here, $14 billion for Israel, who is a staunch ally of the United States, is significant and needed given the crisis that's underway in the Middle East. At the same time, $60 billion asked for Ukraine. Mike Johnson, new Speaker of the House, is anti-sending more money into Ukraine, saying that he wants clarity, he wants more transparency. So it's unclear if this money that President Biden is asking for is ultimately going to move. And look, there are other issues that need to be dealt with. The government in the United States risks shutting down again on November 17th, and they've done no work to try and deal with that. They're going to need to deal with a continuing resolution or something stopgap to keep the government open before they start dealing with foreign spending. But at the end of the day, for a president that is ultimately looking to ensure that the stability of democracies around the world stays in place, there is a new speaker in the House who risks disrupting that foreign policy plan from the White House, and it really does risk some of these democracies, being caught up in the shadows that are hanging overhead.
Or maybe he's not going to last. We should get a head of lettuce and see how long that happens. But on the other big story that we're seeing here in Canada anyway, is all these lawyers, these Trump lawyers, flip, 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 flip. We had a couple of new ones this week. And then
Big
Mark
ones.
Meadows, the
Yeah.
former chief of staff, I don't know if he's flipping or if he is agreeing to testify for limited immunity. What do you make of it all?
Well, at the end of the day, it's all bad news for the former president because these are all people who are the inner parts of his orbit and inner parts of his circle at the White House, now giving information to prosecutors, whether it's at the state level or the federal level, that ultimately are going to give better ideas of the mindset of Donald Trump in the days leading up to and the weeks leading out of the election in 2020. I think the bigger factor here are some of his lawyers that are now flipping in Georgia. Yes, it's a state election, but Fani Willis can then give information to Jack Smith, and that can ultimately have an impact on what's happening with Donald Trump. Look, he's facing a series of legal troubles right now, both at the federal level and the state level. We saw him take the witness stand in New York just a couple of days ago, where he was hit with a $10,000 fine for violating his gag order, and then he stormed out of the courtroom. So this is all very difficult for an ex-president who is rerunning for president again. But at the end of the day, given the turmoil that the United States has found itself in and the kind of turmoil that's happening at the global level, it almost feels like the election race that we've all been watching for the last little bit and will watch for the next year has almost fallen further back on the burners.
We're going to keep our finger on the pulse of it. Keep your phone close. Reggie Cecchini will be calling you for more updates. Thank you, as always, for doing this.
Thank you, Reggie.
Thank you.
Reggie Cecchini in Washington. I hope that Trump goes to jail because he cannot seem to keep his mouth shut and keeps defying those orders to not disparage witnesses and members of the court and what have you.
It's dangerous what he's doing. Show me the money. I want to see
Right?
the big fines. Big.
No, I want to see the
hit 'em.
doors go ka-ching.
I know.
That's what I want.
Yeah. Okay, still to come on the show. Yes, it's true, not fake news. Jan Arden is still ahead on the program.
And also, if you're fed up with paying so much for your internet, who's not? Why are costs so high in Canada? And what is Ottawa doing about it? We're going to dig into that next.
All right, we got to talk viewing party. Wholly inundated with viewing party photos. We're going to turn this into a contest, I swear. Yeah, we got to say hello to Johan and Karen. Hello.
Lots of puppies.
Watching
we
the
have
doggies.
Janelle. Hi, Janelle.
There's
and your toes.
Love it. And Cheryl and Darcy. Hello
Another nice
there.
pup. Kathy and Nogi in Nanaimo.
Yes. Oh, look at that cute puppers. And Agnes, I love the motorhome setup.
Watching in her motorhome. Love it.
Dig it. Time to go shopping.